And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. We are the highly lubricated D Infinity Live. I am, as always, your very sophisticated host, William T. Thrasher. With me again is our wonderful host, Michael Jolly Varhola. How jolly are you right now?
Pretty damn jolly.
And with us in person, Clint Staples.
I am as jolly as any northern barbarian can be.
Or as I like to say, world-renowned sculptor Clint Staples. This is my catchphrase for Clint. So.
Tonight's episode is going to be a very special episode. Among other things, it is the first episode we've done with our hosts physically in the same location in front of the same camera.
That's right. Usually you're somewhere in some hollow of Appalachia. Clint is in Ithaqua territory, the Great White North, and I am, of course, in the Lone Star state of Texas.
And then anybody else who can jump in, who knows where the heck they are. But yes, we are coming to you live from our amazing and spacious suite at Comicpalooza in Houston, Texas.
Woohoo! Whoa. What are you waiting for, dickhead?
Oh, no, I thought you might have a comment.
Oh, yay!
Spontaneity. You don't need to be prompted for everything. If you're an adult, you can... Well, tonight, as those of you who have seen our event page and the show title can tell, our topic is Just Add Cthulhu, bringing the Cthulhu Mythos into your tabletop game, and all those little places where the Cthulhu Mythos intrudes on modern gaming. But before we get into that, we've actually got some pretty cool things to talk about in regards to our co-publishers, Skirmisher Publishing, and also as far as what D-Infinity has going on at Comicpalooza.
We've got a lot going on. To start with, Will, you picked a really good topic for tonight's show. Just Add Cthulhu. We're looking at the mythos and the works of Lovecraft and the people that followed after him. Well, the theme for our games at Comicpalooza this year is pretty much the mythos, and most of them tie in with the theme of the mythos in some way or another. So we're running 40 gaming events over the next 4 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday at Comicpalooza. We will be running continuous gaming of some sort from 10 a.m. until 8 p.m. Every day in the Skirmisher Game Pavilion. I believe that's
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday in, I guess that's room 320. Is the Skirmisher Game Pavilion, but you know what? We're going to have a huge banner over at every door that says Skirmisher Game Pavilion, and it's right next to the Grand Ballroom on the 3rd floor of the George R. Brown Convention Center. So we're going to be running 40 games. Will, you're going to be running 4 Cthulhu Live LARPs.
Yep.
You're going to be running your board game Dagon Rising, which directly ties in with a H.P. Lovecraft story, Dagon. Yep. Clint is going to be running a great miniature system called Chevauché, and he's going to be running some very weird Dark Ages Viking variant rules with Chevauché. So he's going to be running the Saga of the Worm Son, several scenarios tying in with that. And then beyond that, there's going to be our skirmish system rules, our 900-square-foot Little Orc Wars game, which is going to start with a D-Day style naval landing of orcish vessels landing on a beach while being bombarded with live catapult fire. It's the only game that's got live catapult fire. So it's just going to be 4 days of terrific, over-the-top, really fun, innovative gaming.
Yeah, and it's LARPing, wargaming, tabletop. We've got... Tomb of the Sleeping God, Beneath the Mountains of Madness.
These are your scenarios.
Yeah, those are my own scenarios. Mm-hmm. Just because I got to get in a plug in myself.
And then one of our regular hosts, Brendan Cass, he just landed 5 minutes ago at the airport here in Houston, so he's on his way in. We're going to have him here. We're going to have one of our affiliates, Steve Netman. He's going to be working with us. Lucas Purier and his wife Miranda, they're both going to be here running games. Tony Wilson, who used to be part of our Gen Con crew, is now here in Texas. He's now part of our Texas crew. We're going to have him with us. Who else have we got? It's just a great crew. It's like we've trotted out our elite crew. John Cadolf is going to be running Little Orc Wars and running booth 635, our retail booth. Our 400-square-foot retail booth on the convention floor is booth 635. So people should come by to see our new products. Will, What do we got new at the show?
Well, right off the bat, our biggest thing, we have the latest physical copy of the magazine D Infinity. This is volume 6, and as is appropriate, the subject is the mythos.
Yep.
It's all new gaming content, almost all of it tying in with the mythos. We've got a short story by Clint Staples. We've got the rules for Dagon Rises, as well as the game pieces, you need to play.
It's a complete game.
Yeah, it's a complete game. Everything you need except other players and dice we have right here in the magazine. There's some of our, pay no attention to the duck, but we've got our investigators and our deep ones for Dagon Rising.
And the ducks are actually being used by Lucas Purier in his Quack games.
Yep.
So.
And we've got, and it's just loaded. We've got a Pathfinder article. We've got Pathfinder stats for a number of more obscure mythos beasts like the Cats of Ulthar.
Yeah, that's right.
Cool.
Show that.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
We've got an article on how to make your own Innsmouth gold, how to make gold nuggets and gold relics and gold jewelry that matches the description of the mysterious Innsmouth gold from the H.P. Lovecraft story Shadow over Innsmouth.
And you're going to actually have samples of that at our booth, aren't you?
I do.
Look at that. Hey,
I'm going to grab.
Hey, Tony?
Right.
Just come and sit here just 1 minute, Tony.
All right. Yeah.
Here.
Yes. I'm just going to reach into my treasure chest. But yes, right. This is an example of an actual piece of jewelry made following the instructions.
With the tentacles.
Yeah,
and you actually tell how to make that stuff right in that article.
Yep.
And that magazine, for anyone who can't be here to get a physical copy this weekend at Comic Palooza in Houston, that is available on DriveThruRPG, isn't it?
Indeed, it is. It's available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG.com, and with that as well as just about everything else we do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't be here to pick up the Comic Palooza special print edition, it will still be available online.
Yep. And what else have we got out at the show? Reprint of Little Wars.
Yes, by H.G. Wells himself.
So, and then our spin-off fantasy rules, H.G. Wells' Little Orc Wars. And people sometimes say, how can you publish a game called H.G. Wells' Little Orc Wars? Did H.G. Wells ever even hear of an orc? Did he ever write about orcs? To which we reply, shut up. But our H.G. Wells' Little Orc Wars rules, we've reprinted them. We forgot to bring a copy up from the office, but that will be available. And then Clint put together a copy of Chevauche for his Saga of the Worm Sons.
Saga of the Worm Son.
Right, exactly. Scenarios. And I can't say that one time slow. I can't say it 3 times fast.
Well, it's because you're jolly.
So it's good. Actually, I'm fairly jolly. We have busted ass for 24 hours here in Houston, getting ready for this show. We've put out one fire after another, and it has come together. And we are set to welcome the 35,000 to 40,000 people, the Gen Con level of people who are going to be here at this show this weekend, being entertained and regaled by us. We mentioned a minute ago, one of our close friends from our Indianapolis crew, our Gen Con crew, is Tony Wilson, and he just walked in. Tony?
Yeah, let's make some room here.
Yeah, come join us.
Clean cup, move down.
Let's cuddle.
Let's pretend we know each other.
Hello there.
So you're here. You might as well join us. Tony is a longtime player of our Cthulhu live-action horror role-playing game. So he's got a strong background in the mythos. He's going to be helping out with our Cthulhu live LARPs.
Yep.
And really just about anything else. We're going to work him like a mule, just like everybody else. Because we all work like mules at these things. That's why these cons are good. Because we're here doing everything we can to make them good. So welcome, Tony. We're glad that you're here with us. It's kind of cool to have had you with us at our Cthulhu Live release party in Gen Con, which is what? What year did we do that?
Was it 6 years ago?
It was like, I think that was 06. That was 07.
Oh.
That was 7 years ago.
And I was going to say, before that, actually, I think we'd met up with you right after it moved to Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe I met up with Mac.
We were in Indianapolis in 03,
in Milwaukee,
which was the first
couple of years, I think, last couple of years there.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So you've been with us for over a decade now. So now that we, as a company, as a venture, don't do Gen Con anymore because it isn't friendly to publishers, of a certain scale. It's good to have you here with us now that we've shifted venue. So we're glad to have you. So, well, this isn't the Michael Varhola show, so let's move on.
That's a different show. That's about the paranormal.
That's a different show, and we will be doing that on Sunday.
Yeah.
Incidentally, it's possible that H.G. Wells did know about orcs because orcs are an Anglo-Saxon monster.
So he probably did.
That's where
right.
That's where Tolkien got.
And this is what you specialize in, isn't it?
It is what I specialize in too.
All right.
To the degree that I specialize.
So that's a more sophisticated reply than "shut up."
In general.
Okay.
Yeah. Or throwing a drink in someone's face.
Yes.
All right, we ready for the main topic?
Yes.
All right, well,
I'm ready for the main topic.
So our topic tonight is just add Cthulhu, those places where the Cthulhu mythos and tabletop gaming meet. I guess just before we get into our viewer questions, just everybody kind of explain your connection to the mythos and where you see that intersection. And speaking for myself, I see that intersection everywhere. It is a very rare thing now that you find a tabletop role-playing game published that doesn't have some nod or reference to the Cthulhu mythos in it somewhere. Even as I recall, Aberrant, which was a sort of a dark Watchmen-style superhero RPG, no mythos characters, no mythos elements, but there were like super villains who would name themselves after mythos deities because their powers kind of matched up. And so it happens all over the place, and I've always been doing it. I've only ever run 2 World of Darkness LARPs my entire life, and the second World of Darkness LARP was all Cthulhu Mythos based. We came up with a plot about an imprisoned god, and it worked really well. It was a chocolate peanut butter situation. Mike?
What is my take on the mythos, or my take on mythos?
Well, your background, or where you see the intersection.
Well, my background in the mythos is that I've made the H.P. Lovecraft pilgrimage. I've gone to the houses that he lived in Providence, Rhode Island. I visited his grave at midnight, which took some doing. I've read everything that he's ever written under his own name, as far as fiction goes, and many of his letters and other things that he's done. So I've immersed myself in Lovecraft. I've meditated at the shrine of Lovecraft. I know Lovecraft. I love his work, and I think there's nothing more fitting to be incorporated into role-playing games. And that said, being sort of a mean old fart that I am, I don't like that he's been incorporated into so much. Because he's been incorporated into gaming to a great extent by posers who've never bothered to read him. You know, is the standard to go to Lovecraft's grave and meditate upon his grave? No, of course not. That's going above and beyond. But the standard is to read his books, you lazy bastards, not to talk about, Cthulhu's so cool and I love it. No, shut up. Read the shit, understand what it really is, and until you've actually read Robert W. Chambers, and until you can tell me that Ambrose Bierce is the one that invented the concept of Carcosa, if you didn't understand any of the words I just said and you've never read Lovecraft, then let your cheeks burn with shame when you tell me how cool Cthulhu is.
Would you compare it to, maybe it's comparable to all those people that had the dancing bear stickers that claim they're like the Grateful Dead?
The Grateful Dead. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing.
Okay.
It's rampant poserism.
Yeah.
So I love Lovecraft, and I've incorporated him into my games for 33 years, and I think it's absolutely appropriate to do so. But it bugs me to the extent to which it's been done, because I think it's been done by people who don't truly know or understand his work.
Well, and I think that's because Lovecraft, and especially the word Cthulhu, it has reached popular consciousness.
That's right.
When
It's been on South Park.
exactly,
Right.
so is D&D and stuff
Right.
like that, and that's how very often those things are linked. And when we were kids, no one had heard of H.P. Lovecraft.
That's
when
right.
you discovered H.P. Lovecraft, you discovered H.P. Lovecraft.
And it's almost like you were a member of like a little sect.
A little society because you had discovered it.
There
Whereas
weren't that
now-
many people who read it, and you could introduce other people to it.
Whereas you have to work hard now not to have heard of
Right.
Lovecraft or the
Right.
mythos.
Right. That's
Right?
exactly right.
You know, and the mythos has been turned into gaming product from ancient Rome, discounting our own Isle of Kos setting, which has some mythos elements to it. But Other publishers have done it from ancient Rome all the way up to the distant future as gaming settings and pretty much everything in between.
Right.
I think the only time you cannot find a published mythos culture book as an RPG is playing as Neanderthals versus Cro-Magnons versus Cthulhu Mythos. That's really about it now.
It's funny you mention that.
And we can make that work.
But I guess what I'm getting at
Coming
is
in
that
2015.
there you go. I guess what I'm getting at is that as far as the posers are concerned, it may not necessarily be poserism as much as it is that they have a different level of exposure to it. Because they don't have to go anywhere to be exposed to it.
And you know what? And one thing I like about this show is that we can get people on who are more generous of spirit than me.
Watch the first Hellboy movie.
Right.
And you were exposed to everything but the mythos by name.
It was mythos trappings.
Exactly.
Well, remember, it opens with the quote from Der Vermis Mystere.
Exactly.
Although here's what's interesting. The original script, the quote was from the Necronomicon, but Del Toro decided to remove that because he felt the Necronomicon was becoming cliched and overexposed, and it would make it seem like a joke.
Right.
So he had to go for a more obscure mythos tone.
Right.
Yeah, my experience, I remember being in junior high, and a friend of mine, shows up and he's like, "You've got to read this book."
Right.
And then, of course, you devour it, and it's like,
oh,
wait, there's more? There's a whole bunch more? Really? Keep going. Keep bringing them on. And incidentally, same guy that introduced me to the Sandman comics and Watchmen and those kinds of things. So I've got him to thank for that. But yeah, since that point, I think it really, at least from my perspective, informs a lot of my writing. I write a lot of horror short stories, and I feel like that, peeling away the layers from the ordinary world and finding out that things are just complete madness and we're completely outclassed and insignificant, that cosmic horror, that's really what pushes my buttons for me. So
I was just imagining somebody in a trench coat, "Hey, buddy, you want to read some Lovecraft?"
First taste is free.
Of course, the trench coat falls apart. It's like Wilbur Watley.
It's not a trench coat.
Well, Mike, we got some questions from our viewers. What's our first question for the evening?
All right, well, Richard Penwarden, who we know and love and watches the show, says, "Still reeling from Swords and Sorcery on catch-up." Swords and Sorcery was one of our recent episodes.
It was last week's episode.
Last week. "It appears every game I've ever run or been in has been that style. Hey, it's ideal for low-level characters." Okay, so he's talking about the last episode. "As for this week, the challenge I would have as a keeper being the term for Cthulhu Live or Call of Cthulhu games, that's the name for a game master in those games, for a keeper/GM, would be to keep the players alive long enough to enjoy the story. How do you save the characters from their own players' stupidity?" That is it. So that's his question. How do you save the characters from their own players' stupidity?
Well, who wants to grab this one first?
I got an idea or two. First of all, I strongly recommend against rescuing the party. If they get into enough trouble that the deep ones are eating them, then let the deep ones eat them. However, before they get to that point, provide ways that the party can rescue themselves. They got themselves out, they got themselves into this shit. Let them get themselves out. Give them a shovel, give them whatever tools they need to get out, but don't do it for them. Don't have the police show up with dynamite or whatever, right? As fun as that can be, that should be something that the PCs begin. They should be the ones who are initiate that. Thank you. I'm searching for the word there. And whereas if they've gotten themselves into a situation where they are hip deep in deep ones, then give them enough things, and you can add them into the environment on the fly, right? But give them enough things that a canny group of players can get themselves out, possibly with some bad consequences, because it's the mythos, and not everybody gets to go home again.
Okay.
If you do, you're lucky.
Yeah.
I remember, growing up, most of my stuff that I started with was Dungeons and Dragons. Everything's all based off of your level. It's it's an even challenge, and you get into the mythos, and everything is could be completely out of your class at that point. I mean,
two people with empty shotguns against a god.
Exactly. And I think some players coming from different game systems and stuff maybe just don't quite have that way of thinking yet. So when you run into a situation like that, you think, oh, well, I'm just going to fight it, or I'm going to shoot it, or I'm going to burn up with fire, when really you should just run and go hide under your bed, and hopefully it goes away. It gets bored with you and wanders off.
I mean, I guess what I would say in my games, and I'm only talking about my games, I'm not even making recommendations, but I run a Swords and Sorcery fantasy campaign, and this is what I write for. My scenarios these days are all set in the Swords of Coast fantasy campaign setting. All my writing these days, with a few exceptions, is part of the Coast Shared World Fantasy fiction project. So everything I'm doing is set in this Dark Ages, Eastern Aegean, islands just off the coast of Turkey kind of milieu. And the mythos are a part of that, in that the battle between the gods and the Titans, the Titanomachy, is sort of like the seminal event that forms the world that our characters live in. It's this great cataclysm that most people believe was the result of the war between the gods and the Titans. And to me, the Titans are primordial, corrupted, immensely powerful, immensely ancient elemental beings. They are the Great Old Ones of the Cthulhu Mythos. To me, the Titans and the Great Old Ones, they're one and the same. That's what they are. The Titans that get idealized in human form, this is just a misunderstanding of what the Titans are. So for me, the gods of H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, they are the enemies of the gods of humanity. The Olympian gods stepped in to defend humanity against these monstrosities, and that was the Titanomachy. So the Cthulhu mythos are form this sinister veneer that's overlaid over everything I'm doing. That said, my games aren't that much different from what you call what Gary Gygax used to call, when I worked with him, a traditional fantasy campaign setting. It's just that now we know our orcs are Titan spawn. We know that giants are the weak shadows of their titanic forebears. So the mythos are there, and I try to get that sort of sinister, dark, ancient primordial feel into it, but I basically show how they appear in a traditional D&D setting, and the idea that the characters are just going to get eliminated because of this doesn't necessarily happen, because unlike a 1930s style Call of Cthulhu game where the characters are two guys with an empty shotgun against gods, our characters, even in a Swords and Sorcery setting, they're heroes, and they've spent their lives not as academics learning about these things and then being ambushed by them and not knowing how to deal with them. They are people who have honed arcane and divine and combative skills to be able to fight these things. So it's a different kind of thing. Our characters actually have a chance, as they would in so the mythos are a background for my games. They're not something that makes the game unwinnable by the players.
Yeah, and honestly, as far as saving people from their stupidity, their mistakes, I don't ever. That being said, I structure my mythos games so that the lethality is kind of measured. So for the first third of a mythos scenario I'm running, no one's really going to die. If you die in the first third of one of my games, your character had to just flat out hang themselves, because in the first third of my game, nothing is trying to kill you. Second third of one of my scenarios, maybe you'll get injured. Maybe the conflicts that arise will get you injured, might put you under mental stress, or your resources might get attacked. Maybe the second act is when your car crashes or whatnot. So again, nothing really lethal is happening. Then when the final third of the scenario begins, that's when the brakes come off, and because of the forces being invoked, because of the monsters that are present, because of the sheer number of cultists that show up, things can not only get lethal, they can get instantly lethal, and the players, will always have to be on their toes. And if death comes, it will probably be swift. It will probably be messy. It will probably do terrible things. The survivors might envy the dead based on the nature of that death. But, and this is something to keep in mind once adventurers start dying, is that just because your character's gone doesn't mean you're necessarily out of the game. For instance, have the police been called? Are they involved? Your investigator died? No problem. Take over the deputy sheriff. Yeah. Right. And this is fun. I've done this a couple of times. Oh, your character's dead? Here's the stat sheet I've been using for the cult leader. You're now in charge of all the bad guys. And that can be fun. And because it's so quick, it's not like it's a protracted player versus player conflict.
Now, are you talking about a D&D style game, a fantasy game, or are you talking about more like a modern Call of Cthulhu type game?
I'm talking about any game dealing with the mythos. This is how I structure it. So I've done this in fantasy. I've done this in classic 1920s mythos. I've done this in sci-fi.
See, for me, the mythos is more just part of the cosmology. It doesn't necessarily change the way the game is played that much. And I would say that in my games, my players labor under this feeling.
Is it a delusion?
No, it's a delusion. They labor under this feeling that death is always imminent, that I'm out to get them, that the deck is stacked against them. They'll make comments about how I always screw over the players. Truth be told, players never die in my game. I mean, never. Hardly ever. If it takes phenomenally stupid playing, and bad luck. It's a combination of really stupid playing and bad luck for a character to die. We were running through Temple of Elemental Evil. The characters were going into the final Shrine of Fire, which was like defended by like anti-paladin salamanders. I mean, just all this horrible monstrosity stuff. And I said, you do understand what you're going into? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you haven't cast any fire protection spells at all. And they said, we're saving them till later. and this was just a bloodbath, and there wasn't anything I could do. I kept begging them to cast their spells. They're like, no, we're saving them till later. And they were just all annihilated. It was just horrible. And there wasn't anything I could do. But I felt so horrible. I didn't want them to die. And they did. And it was just, and it wasn't a total party kill. I think it was 2 dead and everybody else hideously maimed and forced to retreat. But that was like the worst game in a decade for the party. So yeah, I make it scary, but that said, they really got to fuck up for anyone to die.
Yeah, well, I mean, you gave them fair warning, which is more than a lot of GMs would do.
Yeah. And in case my friend Ho is watching tonight, Ho's the one that said, we are saving them till later.
What about the Tomb of Horrors? Did you ever run them through that?
A lot
of ways
I never ran through Tomb of Horrors. I went through Tomb of Horrors, and you know how like there's 3 entrances and one of them collapses? Yeah. I didn't make it past that.
You're just like, I don't want that gold that much.
But we're actually working on a scenario called the Jester Dragon's Tomb of Horrors, and it is about a bordello where everything is undead. So we're working on that ourselves.
Yeah, and that's something. If you're running a Mythos game and people die in a cave-in, and it's not a cave-in the investigators caused because they were trying to blow up a monster, something has gone wrong.
Yes, right, exactly.
Oh, what's our next question, Mike?
Next question is from our friend Heath, who's been a co-host on the show.
Your namesake was in here a little earlier.
Oh, was he? What namesake?
Uske.
Oh, and he's from down under in Australia, and he says, one for the masses. What 5 things? 5 things? We're going to just do one each. We're going to crowdsource this. You need 5 each? Come on, Heath. What 5 things are invaluable for the novice Cthulian? Can be physical things, can be game inventory items, can be pearls of wisdom, can be anything. Go.
What I think right off the bat, read H.P. Lovecraft. Right off the bat, you need to have read more than one story of H.P. Lovecraft all the way through. And what I always do whenever people ask me about how to get into Lovecraft, I always recommend, and this is as a gamer or as just a reader of horror or a reader in general, I always tell them read in no particular order. Read the Dunwich Horror, which is just like. That book, that story is just a template for a good mythos investigation. You know, if you ever read a really good Call of Cthulhu scenario, yeah, it's probably modeled after that. 2, read excuse me, to read the Shadow over Innsmouth, which is just, that kind of teaches you everything you need to know about how mythos cults work. It ties into Cthulhu without overwhelming you with information about Cthulhu. There's just a lot of brilliant atmosphere in that book. And then I recommend read one other thing, and I usually recommend either Call of Cthulhu, of course.
You gotta read Call of Cthulhu.
Or Whisper in the Darkness, which when I first read that, I was 16 years old. I read that while I was actually a family vacation. We were camping out in the Midwest. The first thing I ever read that truly terrified me. I put down that story after reading the final sentence with trembling hands and a deep sense of dread. And this is the middle of the Arizona desert. That is a phenomenal story. That may very well be Lovecraft's masterpiece. So that's my one.
And then what is the one? And why am I drawing a blank? Each of you can take a smack at me for getting this. What is the one with the most lively awfulness? The one with
the crawling
Kerwin.
Oh, Joseph Kerwin?
Yeah. What's the story?
Dexter Ward, Charles Dexter Ward.
And that's a good one. I'd say it's probably a little wordy. It's a little on the long side, but it's got, well, yeah, it's a novella, but I don't know. I think it goes on a little long. But it's still a good exemplar of the genre.
Well, it's also that the case of Charles Dexter Ward. There's a real exploration of the magic of the mythos in there.
And it has a genuine dungeon.
And a genuine dungeon with undead.
Very few Lovecraft stories actually have an extensive subterranean complex, and this one is actually in outside of Boston. So
yeah.
And if you're looking for something more heroic versus Cthulhu, then look at the mythos writing of Robert E. Howard.
There you go.
Because he tends to write, as anybody who's read Conan or King Kull or any of that, tends to write atavistic heroes, action-oriented fellows and stuff like that, and he did the same thing with the mythos. And so if you get tired of another antiquarian finding something that he never should have pulled off the shelves at Miskatonic, then read the God of Belsagoth or the Fires of Ashurbanipal.
Or is it we're talking about Howard? Is it Bran McMorn?
Bran McMorn.
Bran McMorn stories, which Worms in the Earth.
Worms in the Earth is a
which is chilling, which is horrifying, and that's all about the Romans trying to fight the pagan Picts up along Hadrian's Wall, and it's chilling, horrifying stuff. And really, that's and I love Conan, but that's, I'd say, probably more sophisticated than Conan in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think so.
The Bran McMorn stuff, and it's essentially, on some level, it's got the mythos, but on some level, you could call it historic fiction too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
with a healthy old world supernatural feel to it. Mythos. So first thing, familiarity, deep familiarity with the literary sources. What's the second thing people need?
I would say, and I read his question differently than you did, so I'll give a fifth thing, but it's I'm looking at the question.
Second thing.
Well, no, okay, second thing. Sorry, a second thing, but what I'm saying is I'm giving it from the point of view of a trapping to having a game. And for me, it's the sort of inexplicable artifact. You know, and really Gary Gygax did a great job in B2 Keep on the Borderlands. It's one of the most spare modules you'll ever read. It hardly has any details at all. But there's one point in this evil shrine where there's 4 bronze artifacts. It's like 2 chalices and a big calyx and a pitcher, and they're bronze and they're like permanently stained with blood. And if you handle them, you end up becoming possessed and devoting your life to protecting these artifacts. So it's actually very, very, very Lovecraftian. It's very mythos, and it comes through in just so few words in Keep on the Borderlands. So for me, those kind of weird, obscure, very, very, very dangerous and uncontrollable artifacts, the origin of which is very obscure, for me, that's a very mythos-oriented thing. And that comes through, that's an aspect of Call of Cthulhu. The little squat Cthulhu deity statue, and if you have it in a room near you, you're going to have these horrifying dreams. So these weird artifacts of unknown provenance. I think for me, that is one of the trappings that I think is key to setting a mythos tone in a game or a story.
Yeah, and feel free, because there's always a heavy investigatory aspect to any Cthulhu Mythos scenario. So it's be prepared to come up with interesting and often confusing ways to describe these relics, especially if you're doing a scenario that takes place in a world where there's a scientific method. Inevitably someone's going to try to carbon date maybe one of these relics.
And maybe they can.
And feel, or better yet, give them a reproducible result that shows that it's older than the universe.
Right. Yeah. Relics or relics?
Well.
And actually, I'd piggyback off of that. I'd get back to the cosmic horror element. Something that you try to date and you go, well, there's no way this could even exist. It's beyond anything that I've ever encountered. I really like that idea of being able to take an ordinary situation and then something happens, some catalyst, maybe, like you say, it's a relic of some kind or something that just absolutely turns everything on its head. And you realize, wow, I'm not as safe in my life as I thought I was.
Did you say the horror of something that I tried to date? Did you just say that?
No, but that's a story for another time, or 3 or 4 stories.
Oh, actually, speaking of
Wilbur Whateley.
Yeah. Speaking of inexplicable artifacts, once did a game we had an artifact. It was this some pendant or medallion or something, and it for all intents and purposes appeared to be lead. But once they start really chemically analyzing it, yes, it was technically made of lead, but it was actually absorbing cosmic background radiation and turning itself into uranium. It had reverse radioactive decay, and the players freaked themselves out. Oh no, God, it's radioactive! We're gonna mutate and go sterile. What's happening?
Did they?
They didn't survive long enough.
I was gonna say that would have been the best thing that could happen to them at that point.
Right, exactly.
So what's our number 3 thing?
God, we're only through 2. Okay.
We have a lot to say.
You're on.
Oh, the cosmic horror, the elements of cosmic horror.
Yeah. Okay. So 4th thing.
2 things actually. First of all,
that'll tie it up.
Okay, let me go for the bifecta then.
The
bifecta. First of all, poisonous, mind-shattering magic is so part of the Cthulhu mythos that when you transport it, especially into other games like D&D and stuff like that, where it's a very cut and dry kind of magic system, it's very easy to lose that, and it's not that much work to bring that in, even from a role-playing point of view, making wizards creepy as opposed to just quirky, for example. So I think that's an important thing, and everybody, the book of the dead, or the terrible book that should not be read is as much a trope of fantasy gaming as it is of the Cthulhu mythos. Mm-hmm. And why not make those sanity destroying, or at least costly to people's sanity? If you want to bring a little bit of that mythos feel, mm-hmm. even if you don't bring in deep ones or Bayaki or any of the mythos creatures or the overt trappings of the mythos, you can enhance that sort of feeling of cosmic horror by doing things like that to your fantasy game. Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. Secondly,
the fourth one.
The first and the fourth. Now we're getting into numerology, which is anyway. It's D Infinity Mythos Questions Episode 4.
Yes. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that for beginning keepers and for beginning Cthulians, which I think is what Keith mentioned, deep ones are awesome. There's nothing creepier at its base than a mutant fishman, especially when you can be that mutant fishman if you're not careful.
That's the most terrifying thing about it. It could be you, and it's only a matter of time.
And without mentioning names, we actually had someone from our Indianapolis crew who was undergoing the change, who was turning into a mutant fishman, if you all remember. He was the one that was always curled up under a table while we were doing setup for Cthulhu Live games. So yes, it is horrifying, speaking from experience.
So I think deep ones are a really easy way to bring it in at a comparatively low level, mm-hmm. because
that's right.
Especially as Mike pointed out, most D&D groups are far more combat savvy than the average party of antiquarian Cthulhu investigators in the 1920s, and they have magic and weapons that they can deal with deep ones. But that doesn't mean that they can't be creepy and scary and horrible.
That's right.
And that's up to you as a GM to bring out. And you're not going to bring it out just by throwing wave after wave of deep ones at a group of D&Ders. You're going to bring it out by having deep ones lurking, by having deep ones take away the things that the party cares about.
It's not that they're attacking you.
Right.
It's that they slash your tires so you can't drive out of their shitty little town.
Right. Or the fantasy equivalent. Right.
Or whatever. Right.
Or even worse, the moment your character is alone, a deep one comes shuffling out of the swamp, doesn't attack you, just beckons to. It's willing to share its absolute and terrible secrets with you, and it's perfectly willing to give those secrets freely. That's a really horrifying moment. Because if it does that, then that means there's some connection you don't know about.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the real existential dread that comes through.
Yes.
So I guess we hit 5 things, I think.
We hit 5 things.
We hit 5 things. Any other questions, Mike?
I'm not seeing any other questions posted. There's a lot of comments that people have made throughout.
Woohoo!
Woohoo! Yeah. The fact that we were all getting ready for the convention and didn't get out our invitations prior to the show, I think means a lot of people are going to end up watching it in archive rather than live, and that limited a lot of the questions that we had coming.
Well, regardless of when or where you're watching this, you're watching it live.
Yeah.
Right now.
Exactly. You're here with us now.
Isn't that right, Meredith McIntyre? And somewhere in the world right now, there's a Meredith McIntyre who's watching this and is feeling that existential dread.
Meredith was at the party we were just
Was
at.
that a McIntyre?
Yeah.
All right, there you go. I did it again.
I don't know, maybe.
Well, there's something I did want to bring up, and that I really wanted to touch on, and that's when the mythos doesn't work in gaming. And back when I was in college, there were so many terrible projects that people were doing because, oh yeah, it's like The Gap, but it's a musical, or it's like Goodfellas, but it's a musical, or it's like there was this real theme when I was in college that anybody who couldn't come up with an idea would just turn something into a musical, and I see that happening with Cthulhu Mythos all the time. I see so many things where where it's a miniature war game, but with Cthulhu. It's about gangsters, but with Cthulhu.
I did bring our Cthulhu, our stand-up Cthulhu from. What's that company?
HeroClix?
Vault?
Toy Vault.
Yeah, I have the Toy Vault rubber Cthulhu statue for use in our Little Orc Wars game. So yes, it's a miniatures game with Cthulhu.
But we're like that. That's the only idea.
So I'm going there.
Yeah, but like that's the only idea, that the mythos is in it with no understanding of the mythos and absolutely no work done.
This goes back to my first comment.
To integrate the mythos into the theme, and you end up with a game with the cosmology that's incomprehensible, that that often shows the creator's lack of understanding the mythos or lack of investment in the mythos.
I go so far as to say, and this might be a little bit heretical, feel free to tell me you don't agree with me, but I'd go so far as to say if you really want to understand the mythos, don't start with Lovecraft, start with Chambers. And read Chambers and say, what the hell is this?
You're talking about the inhabitant of Carcosa?
I'm talking about King in Yellow.
Yeah.
And just read through this, and you'll say, well, this isn't even really a story. It's all atmospheric, so it's weird, and it's disquieting, and it gives you this odd feeling, but it's barely a story. This is the quintessence of the mythos on some level. And Chambers influenced Lovecraft. So I would just say, if you could say you've read Chambers, when people start talking about Lovecraft, you can say, oh yeah, well you could really see where he was influenced by Chambers on this. Then you've gone from being a poser to someone who kind of knows what they're talking about to really having a sense for the genre. I would say.
Oh yeah.
Or you've seen True Detective.
And I haven't seen True Detective.
Because
and I read Chambers 30 years ago. So.
Granted, but I I think
Or you've seen True Detective.
If Chambers were alive, he would be seeing all kinds of residuals from people buying The King in Yellow.
Or being really in oh, well, that's true.
So.
That's
Oh
true.
yeah. Which was actually that was actually a real thrill that I was seeing references to Robert W. Chambers on the series.
I'd heard about that.
Yeah. The first time they mentioned Carcosa, I was like, oh my god!
Yeah, that was a real treat, right? Yeah, no question.
And it's so weird because we get so used because like we make references to the Hastur branch of the Cthulhu Mythos constantly.
Yeah.
It's so weird to hear that coming from somewhere outside of this circle.
Yeah.
But you know what? The nice thing about True Detective, to totally veer off for a second, is that the people that wrote the show obviously had read the material and understood at least a significant amount of what was there. They weren't posers that were just throwing it out there.
That's right. Okay.
As people were afraid of when the
they
show
weren't
was
pandering.
Exactly. People were afraid that the final episodes weren't going to deliver because,
And they did.
Because they thought that maybe these people were just throwing it out there as a reference for people like
Name
us
dropping.
to get exactly as a name drop.
And that's and pandering in a lot of ways has made it difficult to introduce a lot of Mythos gaming to newer players because now if you have Cthulhu or Cthulhu's cult show up in your game, people don't think of this inexplicable thing. People don't think of the story. People think of the cute Cthulhu sticker or the cute Cthulhu stuffed animal. There's so many, for lack of a better term, cutesy poo Cthulhu Mythos product out there that is so much more well known.
And if they had any damn sense at all, they'd realize that perhaps was a whole new layer of insidiousness. This is how they inure you to Cthulhu. Oh, Cthulhu's cute. My soul, my soul.
Actually, I think there's a short story about exactly that, where the forces of the mythos are able to instantly take over the world because everyone's been subconsciously programmed to think the mythos is normal.
They're cute. I mean, Cthulhu isn't cool. When I heard somebody say that, I mean, he's this great stinking mass of
scabrous, blubbery,
of non-earthly matter. I mean, he is the quintessence of corruption, of elemental corruption. So yeah, he's not cool. He is anathema to normal human life.
Yeah, and
love it.
Oh, yeah. Oh well, actually, what are some unusual mythos mashups that you guys have seen that's worked really well? I mean, we've talked about True Detective.
I think the original League of Extraordinary Gentlemen stuff had a lot of interesting things that way, especially the some of the smaller features that were inside the collected graphic novel. There was one that relates Randolph Carter and John Carter of Mars.
Oh,
that's right.
You were telling me about this. It's brilliant.
And it's actually a great little comic that Alan Moore threw together. It's only maybe 30 pages altogether, but I love Alan Moore's ability to take seemingly unrelated things and stick them together and have everybody go, why the crap didn't I think of that before, right?
Well, that's pretty good. That's smart. That's very astute writing. Taking John Carter and Randolph Carter. But if he'd also rolled Jimmy Carter into that, then he'd be brilliant.
I know I have committed madness in my heart many times.
I've committed madness in my heart.
And I build houses.
Yeah.
Habitat for Insanity.
Oh, nice.
Habitat for Inhumanity.
Okay, I think I know what a future Cthulhu Live event's going
There
to be.
we have
Habitat for Insanity. They start building. Jimmy Carter starts building a Habitat for Humanity house on top of some tomb that's been sealed away. Something's gone horribly wrong.
And I guess one of my favorite mashups, and it's been done. Many people have done it. I remember seeing it done very, very nicely in White Dwarf magazine for, I think, a Call of Cthulhu scenario back in the early 80s. Back before White Dwarf was
before
just...
GW White Dwarf.
Before, yeah, right. No, back when it was like a real magazine with a soul. Before. It's really Mythos now. But they did one that was basically, they had a bunch of models of like Space 1999 Falcons or something.
Oh.
And it was like some people had landed on some planet. It was an exploratory group. and they dumped into to Mythos source. So I like that sci-fi Mythos mashup. Like I said, it's been done. It's not completely new, but it's fun and it's atypical.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's one that at the time everyone was sure would not work, which was Cthulhu Tech, where they combined giant fighting robots anime with the Cthulhu Mythos. But it's a really good genre mashup. My only critical thing about it, I'm not a big fan of the way magic works. The magic is not as disturbing as I feel it should be, but the way they justify the giant robots and the Cthulhu Mythos and the idea that there's a united Earth government fighting a war against Deep Ones and fighting a war against the Migo and against the King in Yellow, and also just the horror of because you're fighting the forces of the Mythos, and because they are backed by creatures that might as well be gods, it's a dark future where one of the dark aspects is, for the safety of humanity, everyone's freedom of religion had to be taken away. Because you could actually be worshiping a god that's trying to end the world. And civilization is just at a breaking point where it can't handle that.
And really, at the risk of sounding cynical, I guess that's most religions, isn't it?
Well, that's a topic for another show.
And a damn good one.
And a damn good one.
That pun was divine.
Well, and
a little arcane.
I know, Will, you're a big fan of Fading Suns.
Oh, yeah.
And so am I. And I think that although there is no mention of Cthulhu or the Mythos overtly in there, the concept of cosmic horror and the sort of terrifying unknown is everywhere in the Fading Suns.
Oh, yeah, the dark between the stars, the
Exactly.
Mizraim.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, in Heretics and Outsiders, there is one mention of the King in Yellow.
Oh, okay.
There is the King in Yellow is name dropped once, and it hits you when you read that part of the source books. Very cool.
I'd also chime in with mashing it up with Western. I mean, weird Western stuff is your Jonah Hex stuff from DC, things like that. That's,
and you and Will have done that in a number of scenarios with Cthulhu Live scenarios.
Yeah,
right?
the Gunman of
a number
Red
of the
Canyon.
ones you've done. Yeah. And Muerte El Chupacabras. That's not exactly Wild
Well,
West.
it's not Wild
It's set
West,
in the
Wild
West.
but it's American.
Yeah.
It's American West,
Yeah.
modern day.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and of course, there's plenty of Mythos elements that are in Deadland. That's the classic Weird West.
So there's a lot in that. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, I think we're coming up on an hour, Will.
All
We
right.
want to give our last words and tie up.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We've had a really good show, but yeah, let's go ahead and move into
It's
our
been
last
good
words.
for us. We hope it's been good for you, but it's been good for us.
Oh yeah, it's great to actually be together with all of our people.
It's true.
Is it great?
It's far too
Let
rare.
us know.
But yeah, if there's enough people, maybe we'll do a Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter will just be to get plane tickets for us, and once a month we'll all be in the same city.
But honestly, the
doing a
dream
shit.
for me would be anyone that we've had on this show as a host or a co-host. It would be nice to really. I feel that we don't have you all here. Richard, I don't even know if you're watching this show, you son of a bitch. You should be, but I wish you were here, Richard Balsley. That would be great. Heath, you've got an open invitation in many places in North America. So if you can, come up from down under. So any of you who have been on the show and are not on the show tonight, we're missing you, and we wish you were here.
Absolutely.
Except you, Chris.
Well,
Bastard.
What?
Chris is here. We're gonna see him later.
Yeah,
I just mess him.
he'll go. And Brendan, the runt, he'll be here. What, gentlemen, as we are quickly losing our minds, what are our final thoughts about the Mythos in gaming?
Well, and about any final thoughts? We need to go back to the viscera of final thoughts, which is your final thought doesn't have to tie in with the show. It can be about anything.
Go nuts. Free associate.
final thought, if you're going to delve into the Mythos and you'd like to play Call of Cthulhu or Cthulhu Live, make sure you're ready to go insane. Enjoy the sanity loss and know that your character is most likely going to die. It's just a matter of living the longest and longer than anyone else, and that's where the fun comes in.
Well put.
Yes, who will be eaten last.
Yeah. You don't have to run fast, just faster than your friends.
And flamethrowers are heavy.
Yeah.
What is your last word?
My last word, I guess, is that just as a quick quip of advice, less is more when it comes to the Cthulhu Mythos. It's really easy to have Cthulhu show up on page 6. As it were, or that kind of thing. And I said that in a fiction sense because he never shows up on page 6. He damn well never shows up at all. But he in a game, it's very easy for the GM to throw too much at the players too fast, and at the very least, they get completely blasé about it. And then you've totally lost any sense of horror or creepiness that you were hoping to cause with throwing the mythos in at your players to begin with. So start small, start subtle, and ramp up from there. And pick the players that you know are going to creep out easiest. Know your players, and don't pick the guy who always plays the meat bucket who's got the highest armor class and the biggest sword, because he's not there to be afraid. Pick the person who likes to get freaked out. And do it. Freak them out. And you start freaking that person out, and everybody else gets easier to scare. So, there you go.
Yeah, there's a regular cascade of terror.
Yeah. My last word, I reserve the right, as always, to have 2 last words. The first is going to be, if you can come to Comic Palooza in Houston this weekend, come out and see us. Come out and see us in Comic Palooza. You can see the mythos in action in gaming. It's just going to be a great convention, and we hope you can be here with us. And my second last word is, Tony, scooch over and let Brendan come in and say hello to us. Brendan Cass. Okay.
To live and breathe, Brendan Cass.
Say hi. Brendan Cass is going to be running the Skirmisher Game Pavilion on the 3rd floor of the George R. Brown Convention Center this weekend. He just got in from the airport. Welcome. It's going to be a great weekend. Will, give the last word.
All right,
we'll tie up the show.
If you want to investigate the mythos, if you're going to game with the mythos, whatever, anything you want to do with the mythos, don't go alone. As awesome as Reanimator is, it's better to watch Reanimator with a friend. If you're already into the Cthulhu Mythos, share it with somebody. Lend someone your books. If you're not into the Cthulhu Mythos, find someone who isn't, share with them, or find somebody who doesn't know anything about it and explore together. It's just, it's like any actual, scenario where your life is at risk. It is always better to go in with a buddy where you can watch each other's back. It just makes it a much better experience.
Well put.
And then split up to cover more ground.
Never split up.
And have a talking dog.
And go downstairs for a shower.
That's right.
Or at least for premarital sex.
or smoking the marijuana and having premarital sex.
Go. Why not?
What the hell's wrong with you? You buffoon?
Well,
I thought the show was over.
No, we were live.
Oh no, this is live. Everyone's seeing this.
It's
We're
just-
okay.
it's sort of coming
It's
apart
not
at
like
the
I haven't trotted past in my pajamas. Hey, Brendan. Hi, Diane.
Well, as we are at risk of going wildly off course. So for all
There's
of us,
nobody up there for that party, by the way.
all of
Is
us
this still
here at D Infinity, and all of us here from Skirmisher Publishing, from everyone on the floor here at Comic Palooza, this has been D Infinity Live, and we will see you all next week, if not sooner, on a special other live show this weekend. Who knows?
What do you mean, who knows? We have a special show on Sunday.
I gave you my word,
okay.
You guys wouldn't come back.
Why don't you tell the audience about our special show on Sunday?
We have a special show on Sunday. It's going to be more of the same. Come join us.
More of the same and better and crazier. Good night, everybody. Cthulhu Fatagan, Haster.